Pathacast.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and with me as always is my co-host and fellow urban explorer, Rowan. We've got quite the story for you today about Sydney's incredible housing transformation.
And what a transformation it is. You know, Alex, I was looking at these numbers earlier and they absolutely floored me.
Right? Here's something that might surprise our listeners too. Picture this. You're trying to build your dream home in Sydney, but there's only 4% of industrial land left undeveloped in the entire metropolitan region. And if that's not challenging enough, property values have shot up by 49% in just 4 years.
Wow, that's basically half again in value. It really puts things in perspective when you think about trying to build a home today versus just a few years ago.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning of what we're diving into today. We're going to explore how Sydney's home building story has become this fascinating intersection of land scarcity, cutting-edge sustainability, and some pretty impressive innovations.
I'm particularly excited to talk about Western Sydney. It's becoming this incredible new frontier for housing, isn't it?
It absolutely is. We'll be looking at everything from the latest in sustainable building practices to the economic pressures that are reshaping how we approach home construction. Trust me, listeners, you're going to want to stick around for this one.
And I've got so many questions about those smart home technologies everyone's talking about.
Well then, let's get started. Let's dig deeper into this land squeeze situation in Sydney. You know, it's fascinating how we've reached a point where finding space to build has become almost like a treasure hunt.
I've heard some developers say exactly that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at a pretty significant land supply deficit in the next few years, right?
That's right. Between 2025 and 2030, Sydney's facing a shortfall of anywhere between 91 and 319 hectares of developable land. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the size of 150 football fields at the lower end.
That's actually quite shocking when you think about it. How are developers dealing with this squeeze?
And they're having to get really creative. We're seeing a lot more vertical development, obviously, but there's also this interesting trend of repurposing existing industrial sites. The challenge is that with only 4% of industrial land left, every development decision becomes incredibly strategic.
I can imagine the competition for that remaining land must be intense.
Oh, absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting. That 49% increase in land values we mentioned earlier, that's creating this domino effect throughout the entire construction sector. Developers are having to completely rethink their approaches to make projects viable.
So what does that actually mean for someone wanting to build a home?
Well, imagine you're playing Tetris, but with real estate. Every square meter has to be maximized for value. We're seeing smaller lot sizes, more efficient design layouts, and a big push toward medium-density development where possible.
That's quite a shift from the traditional Australian dream of a quarter-acre block.
Exactly. And speaking of shifts, there's this fascinating development happening in places like Marsden Park, where developers are creating these incredibly efficient community designs. They're managing to maintain livability while working with much smaller land footprints.
I've seen those. They're using some pretty innovative design approaches, aren't they?
They sure are. But here's what's really interesting. This land squeeze is actually driving some unexpected positive changes. Developers are being forced to think more creatively about sustainable design, shared spaces, and community integration.
That makes sense. When you've got less space to work with, you've got to make every square meter count.
And it's not just about efficient use of space. The scarcity is pushing the industry towards some pretty innovative construction methods. We're seeing more prefabricated elements, modular designs, and even some experimental approaches to foundations that minimize the building footprint.
But surely this must be putting enormous pressure on prices.
That's one of the biggest challenges. When you combine the land shortage with rising construction costs, it's creating this perfect storm for housing affordability. The industry's really having to balance innovation with accessibility.
I've noticed a lot more development activity in Western Sydney. Is that where the future lies?
Western Sydney is definitely becoming a crucial piece of the puzzle. The new airport and transport links are opening up new possibilities, but even there, we're seeing a much more strategic approach to land use than in previous decades.
So it's not just a simple matter of moving west and building there?
Not at all. Even in Western Sydney, developers are having to navigate complex environmental regulations, existing infrastructure limitations, and careful urban planning requirements. It's a delicate balance between expansion and preservation.
It sounds like we're at a real turning point in Sydney's development story.
We absolutely are, and what's particularly fascinating is how this land squeeze is forcing us to reimagine not just how we build, but how we live. We're seeing the emergence of new community models, innovative housing types, and a fundamental shift in what people expect from their homes.
That's quite a transformation from where we were just a few years ago.
And it's only the beginning. The solutions we're developing now in response to this land squeeze are likely to shape Sydney's housing landscape for generations to come. You know, Rowan, Western Sydney is really writing its own chapter in Sydney's development story right now. The scale of what's happening out there is unprecedented.
I've heard some incredible numbers about the Western Sydney International Airport project. How much is that changing the game?
It's completely reshaping the region. We're not just talking about an airport, we're looking at what they're calling an aerotropolis. It's creating this ripple effect of development that's transforming places like Badgerys Creek, Kemps Creek, and even as far as Penrith.
An aerotropolis? That's quite a term. What exactly does that mean for housing in the area?
Think of it as this massive catalyst for growth. The airport itself is expected to create thousands of jobs, which naturally creates demand for housing. But here's what's fascinating. Developers aren't just building traditional suburbs anymore. They're creating these integrated communities with a mix of housing types we haven't really seen before in Sydney.
I've noticed that. The designs seem really different from what we're used to seeing.
Exactly. Take the new developments in places like Box Hill and Marsden Park. They're incorporating these amazing community spaces, walking trails, and even tech hubs. It's like they're building mini cities rather than just housing estates.
But what about transport? I mean, that's always been a big issue in Western Sydney, hasn't it?
That's where things get really interesting. The new Metro West line is going to be a game changer. When it's completed, you'll be able to get from Parramatta to the Sydney CBD in about 20 minutes. And there's this whole network of new transport corridors being planned.
20 minutes? That's incredible. But surely this is putting huge pressure on housing prices in these areas?
Well, here's the surprising part. While prices are definitely rising, they're still significantly lower than in the eastern suburbs, and developers are getting really creative with housing solutions. We're seeing these innovative terrace home designs that maximize space while keeping costs relatively manageable.
What kind of innovations are we talking about?
So, for example, in areas like Liverpool and Campbelltown, they're building these smart designed homes that use every square meter efficiently. Think vertical gardens, rooftop solar is standard, and these clever shared community spaces that make smaller lot sizes feel much more livable.
That sounds like a pretty significant shift from the traditional suburban model.
It really is. And you know what's fascinating? The demographic mix out west is creating this amazing diversity in housing needs. Young families, professionals, multi-generational households, they all need different types of homes, and developers are responding with some really innovative solutions.
I've heard there's also a big focus on sustainability in these new developments.
Absolutely. The Western Sydney developments are actually leading the way in sustainable design. Many of the new communities are incorporating things like district cooling systems, water-sensitive urban design, and even community renewable energy projects.
That's quite forward thinking, but how are they managing the summer heat out west? That's always been a challenge, right?
Now that's where some really clever design comes in. They're using this combination of green corridors, water features, and smart orientation of streets and buildings to create what they call cool corridors. Plus, there's this massive tree planting initiative happening across the region.
So it's not just about building houses, but it's about creating entire ecosystems?
Exactly. And here's something that might surprise you. Some of these new developments are actually increasing biodiversity in the area. They're incorporating native plantings, wildlife corridors, and even artificial wetlands that help manage stormwater while creating habitats.
That's really changing the way we think about suburban development, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Western Sydney is becoming this living laboratory for new approaches to urban development. The solutions they're finding out there could well become the template for how we develop other parts of Sydney in the future. You know what's fascinating about Sydney's home building revolution? It's not just about where we're building, but how we're building. The green revolution in construction is completely transforming the industry.
I've noticed solar panels everywhere these days. It's almost becoming standard, isn't it?
It's gone way beyond just solar panels now. We're seeing this incredible integration of smart technology with sustainable design. Homes are being built with these sophisticated energy management systems that can actually learn and adapt to your daily routines.
Wait, so the house learns from you? How does that work?
Imagine your home automatically adjusting its temperature based on when you usually wake up, or your hot water system heating up just before you typically take a shower. These systems are cutting energy use by up to 30% in some cases.
That's impressive, but I'm guessing all this technology comes with a pretty hefty price tag.
Here's the interesting part. While there is an upfront cost, these features are actually becoming more affordable. Plus, the long-term savings are substantial. Many homeowners are seeing their energy bills drop by hundreds of dollars per month.
I've also heard about some new building materials that are supposedly better for the environment.
Oh, yes. This is where things get really exciting. We're seeing these innovative materials that actually help regulate temperature naturally. There's this new type of insulation made from recycled materials that performs better than traditional options.
Really? What kind of recycled materials are we talking about?
Everything from recycled denim to processed waste products. But here's what's really cool. Some builders are using these new eco-concrete mixes that actually absorb carbon dioxide as they cure. It's like the building itself is helping to clean the air.
That sounds almost too good to be true. Does it work as well as regular concrete?
It's actually testing better in some applications. And when you combine these materials with smart design principles like passive solar orientation and natural ventilation, you're looking at homes that require minimal heating and cooling.
I've noticed a lot of new homes have these really large windows. Is that part of this whole green approach?
Exactly, but they're not just any windows. We're talking about smart glass that can change its tint based on the sunlight, or triple glazed units that provide amazing insulation. Some builders are even incorporating living walls. Imagine entire sections of your home covered in plants that help regulate temperature and clean the air.
Living walls inside houses? That must need a lot of maintenance.
Actually, they're designing these systems to be largely self-maintaining. They're connected to smart irrigation systems that monitor soil moisture and plant health. It's pretty incredible how technology and nature are working together in these designs.
Speaking of technology, but what about water conservation? That's always been a big issue in Sydney.
Now that's where some really innovative solutions are coming in. New homes are being built with integrated gray water systems that can recycle water from your shower or washing machine for garden use. Some developments are even incorporating rainwater harvesting systems that can supply up to 70% of a household's non-drinking water needs.
70%? That's huge. But how are homeowners adapting to all these new systems?
The key has been making them user-friendly. Most of these systems can be controlled from your phone, and they're designed to work automatically in the background. The real challenge has been educating people about the benefits.
I can imagine it's quite a learning curve for some people.
True, but here's what's interesting. Once people experience living in these homes, they rarely want to go back. The combination of comfort, cost savings, and knowing you're reducing your environmental impact is pretty compelling.
It sounds like we're seeing a real shift in what people expect from their homes.
Absolutely. And the most exciting part is that this is just the beginning. The innovations we're seeing now are laying the groundwork for even more sustainable building practices in the future. These aren't just homes. They're like living, breathing ecosystems designed to work with nature rather than against it. You know, Rowan, with all these amazing innovations we've been discussing, there's another crucial piece of the puzzle we need to explore: the delicate balance between quality and affordability in Sydney's housing market.
I've been wondering about that. How are developers managing to incorporate all these new features while keeping homes somewhat affordable?
That's the real challenge. When you factor in the land costs we discussed earlier, plus the premium for sustainable materials and smart technology, we're seeing builders walking this incredibly fine line.
I imagine regulatory compliance adds another layer of cost too.
Oh, absolutely. You know what's interesting though? While compliance costs have gone up, some builders are finding that investing in quality materials and better construction methods actually saves money in the long run through fewer defects and warranty claims.
But surely those savings aren't enough to offset the initial costs. I mean, we're still seeing prices climb, aren't we?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Some builders are using innovative financing models where the energy savings from these sustainable features are factored into the mortgage calculations. It's like the house is helping pay for itself.
That's clever. But what about first home buyers? They're still struggling to get into the market, right?
That's one of the most challenging aspects. But there's this fascinating trend where some developers are creating what they call hybrid homes. Properties that incorporate some premium features while keeping others more basic, with the ability to upgrade over time.
Sort of like a starter pack for sustainable living?
Exactly. Think of it like building a computer. You start with the essential components, but design it so you can easily add more features later. These homes have the basic smart infrastructure installed, but leave room for future upgrades.
That's actually quite brilliant. Are buyers responding well to this approach?
The response has been really encouraging, especially among younger buyers who understand they might not be able to afford everything at once, but want the option to improve their homes over time.
But what about the construction quality? There's been a lot of talk about building defects in recent years.
That's where some of the new construction methods are really proving their worth. Prefabricated components, for instance, are not only more cost-effective, but often more precise because they're made in controlled factory conditions.
Really? I always thought prefab meant lower quality.
That's a common misconception. Modern prefabrication is incredibly sophisticated. We're seeing entire wall systems complete with plumbing and electrical pre-installed, which not only reduces construction time, but also minimizes the risk of errors.
So faster construction means lower costs?
In theory, yes, but here's the catch. The savings aren't always passed directly to buyers because builders are dealing with rising material costs and labor shortages. But what we are seeing is better value for money in terms of build quality and energy efficiency.
I've heard some builders are using artificial intelligence to help manage costs. Is that true?
Yes, this is one of the most exciting developments. AI is being used to optimize everything from material ordering to construction scheduling. Some builders are even using machine learning to predict and prevent potential construction issues before they happen.
That sounds like it could make a real difference to the bottom line.
It does, but you know what's really interesting? The biggest cost savings are often coming from the simplest innovations. Things like standardizing design elements or improving site logistics might not sound exciting, but they can significantly impact the final price.
So it's not all about high tech solutions?
Not at all. Sometimes it's about being smarter with what we already have. For instance, some builders are creating these amazing communities by carefully planning shared spaces, which reduces individual plot sizes but actually improves livability.
It sounds like the industry is really having to think outside the box.
That's exactly right. And while we might not see housing prices dramatically drop anytime soon, what we are seeing is better value for money. Homes that are more durable, more efficient, and better adapted to future needs. You know what fascinates me about construction innovation, Rowan? It's not just about building better, it's about building smarter. The industry is completely reinventing itself.
I've heard whispers about some pretty groundbreaking stuff happening. What's catching your eye?
Well, imagine construction sites where robots work alongside humans. It's already happening. There are these amazing autonomous machines that can lay bricks 3 times faster than traditional methods, and they're getting more sophisticated every year.
Wait, robot bricklayers? Are they actually being used in Sydney?
They're being tested on several sites, yes, but here's what's really interesting. It's not about replacing workers. It's about handling the repetitive tasks so skilled tradies can focus on the more complex aspects of construction.
What other kinds of automation are we seeing?
One of the most exciting developments is in 3-dimensional printing. There are now printers that can create entire wall sections using specialized concrete mixtures. They're not just faster, they can create these incredibly complex shapes that would be almost impossible to build traditionally.
That sounds amazing, but is it practical for actual homes?
That's where things get interesting. While we're not quite at the stage of printing entire houses in Sydney, we're seeing these technologies being used for specific components. Think decorative elements, custom fixtures, even structural elements in some cases.
I've also heard something about buildings that can heal themselves. That sounds like science fiction.
Actually, it's very real. There's this fascinating development in materials science where they're creating concrete that contains tiny capsules of bacterial spores. When a crack forms, these bacteria activate and produce limestone that fills the crack.
That's incredible. So the building actually repairs itself?
Exactly. And here's another mind bender. There are now materials being developed that can change their properties based on environmental conditions. Imagine windows that automatically become more insulating when it's cold, or wall materials that can store and release heat as needed.
These all sound pretty expensive, though. Are they practical for regular home construction?
Well, that's where economies of scale come in. Take cross-laminated timber, for example. 10 years ago, it was seen as this exotic, expensive material. Now it's becoming mainstream because we've figured out how to produce it more efficiently.
Cross-laminated timber, that's the super strong engineered wood, right?
Right, and it's a perfect example of where construction is heading. It's sustainable, it's strong, and because it's prefabricated, it can reduce construction time by up to 50% compared to traditional methods.
Speaking of time, I've heard some builders talking about something called digital twins. What's that all about?
Now that's a game changer. Imagine having a complete virtual replica of a building before it's built. You can simulate everything from how it will handle severe weather to how the air conditioning will perform in different seasons.
So it's like a test drive for a building?
Exactly, and it goes even further. These digital twins continue to collect data after the building is complete, helping with maintenance and optimization. Some systems can even predict when components might need replacement before they fail.
That must save a lot of headaches down the line.
And money too. But you know what's really exciting? All these innovations are starting to work together. We're seeing artificial intelligence coordinating robot workers, while 3-dimensional printing creates custom components, and digital twins optimize the whole process.
It sounds like construction sites of the future will look very different from what we're used to.
They already do. And here's something fascinating. These changes are actually making construction safer. When robots handle the dangerous jobs and sensors monitor everything from structural integrity to air quality, the whole site becomes much safer for workers.
I guess the future of construction is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
That's a perfect way to put it. And as these technologies become more accessible, we're going to see them transform not just how we build, but what we can build. The limits of construction are being completely redefined. You know, Rowan, looking back at everything we've covered today, It's clear that Sydney's home building story is so much more than just bricks and mortar.
It really is. We're seeing this perfect storm of challenges creating some incredible opportunities, aren't we?
Exactly. The land scarcity that could have been this insurmountable obstacle is actually pushing us to innovate in ways we never expected. From Western Sydney's transformation to these amazing sustainable building technologies, we're seeing solutions that could influence construction practices worldwide.
I'm particularly impressed by how the industry is balancing all these competing demands. It's like watching this intricate dance between technology, sustainability, and affordability.
And you know what's really encouraging? The solutions we're developing here in Sydney. They're not just quick fixes. We're seeing fundamental shifts in how we think about urban development.
It's fascinating how necessity really does drive innovation. Do you think other cities will follow Sydney's lead?
I think they'll have to. The challenges we're facing here, limited land, environmental concerns, housing affordability, these aren't unique to Sydney. We're just among the first to tackle them head on.
So, in a way, Sydney's becoming this testing ground for the future of urban living?
Exactly. And while we've got plenty of challenges ahead, I'm genuinely optimistic. We're not just building homes anymore. We're reimagining what living in a modern city can be.
Well, that's all we've got time for today, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Sydney's building revolution.
Thanks for listening.